Putin, in my opinion, considers radical Islam his biggest security threat. But he does not want the United States unilaterally to determine how the situation in the region will develop. So when the administration found itself in the extremely difficult and potentially embarrassing position of having refused a request for military action, of having been seeing a request for military action refused by the Congress, he saw an opportunity to perhaps get into step with us by easing an immediate American difficulty, but solving a common problem. In my observation, his biggest fear in Syria was that it would lead to a radicalization of the region, and not so much to protect any one individual.
Do you think that Russia can be trusted to have the same interests as the United States here? Should we trust what is coming out of Moscow these days?
We don't have the same interests, but we have, in some cases, compatible interests. I think the Russians were concerned, as Henry pointed out, that the region might explode, and this will affect also Russia's position, particularly in the Caucasus, where there is an Islamic resentment against Russian domination that's gaining momentum and is becoming more violent. And secondly, he saw an opportunity to diminish America's standing as the preeminent power in the region. The fact of the matter is, our hegemony in the region is declining, but we're still the main player. Russia saw an opportunity to actually become also a significant player in this game by arranging something that perhaps will temper the dynamic towards a regional upheaval and will consolidate Russian influence with the Syrians, with the Iranians, and perhaps even with others. There was recently a rather mysterious visit to Moscow of a very high-level emissary from Saudi Arabia. Not that Saudi Arabia is turning to Moscow, but that Moscow is perhaps, again, a significant player. This is the calculus that Putin has. It so happens it is compatible, in my view, with our interests, because I see our involvement in the Syrian affair as something very unfortunate, unnecessary. I don't think an attack on Syria to strike at its chemical assets would be very productive for us. It would not solve the problem. It might ignite a wider regional explosion. So I think there is some compatibility tactically, maybe even strategically, between us and the Russians at this stage.
There is one area, though, where people say there is a big disagreement, which is Russia wants Assad to stay in power. The president has said Assad must go.
The president said Assad must go without having a strategy to make him go. And we have now seen the consequences of that. I think maybe there will be some formula that will resolve that dilemma. For example, Assad's term expires next year. This issue is not going to be solved so quickly. Perhaps something can be contrived, especially if at the same time there is some movement in the American-Iranian dialogue, so that aspect becomes somewhat contained, perhaps pacified, perhaps begins to lead to some sort of understandings.
Henry, there was an op-ed by Edward Luttwak, a strategic analyst, who argued that it does not serve America's interests to have a kind of violent regime change of the Assad regime, because what is likely to follow is chaos and radical Islam, and nor does it serve our interests for Assad to consolidate power, that in a strange way this stalemate helps American interests. What do you think of that theory?
I think it was a mistake to define the issue in Syria